It was the end of the first day at Gettysburg. Thousands of men lie dead on the battlefield. General Robert E. Lee of the Confederates was in trouble. He needed a victory, but the Union Army was dug in on the hills. He couldn't just retreat. After all, the Confederates needed a resounding victory. So what did happen during the actual Battle of Gettysburg? That's exactly what we'll talk about today in part 3 of the Confederates' mistakes at Gettysburg. The American Civil War had been going on for 3 years already. After a strong start, marked by remarkable victories, the Confederacy was now on its heels. Much of the western territories had been lost, and Vicksburg, the last bastion of the South on the Mississippi, was under siege. The Union blockade had isolated the rebels from the European powers. France and England showed a willingness to support the cause of the Confederacy, but not before the Southerners could show that they could survive. It wasn't enough to defend themselves, but they had no hope of winning the war of attrition against the more populous and prosperous North. A victory against the Unionists in Pennsylvania would have shown that no territory in the North was safe. It would have demonstrated that the South could defend itself and would have put enough pressure on Lincoln to accept a peace. That could have made France and England believe that they had a reason to recognize the Confederacy, and their fleets might have opened the ports under blockade. With the weapons and financial support of the Europeans, a new wave of victory would have put the Southerners back on track. And the cherry on top, well, a resounding victory would most likely have led to the defeat of the South's most hated enemy, US President Abraham Lincoln, in the fall elections. Lee had led his army into Pennsylvania to do just that, bring a heroic victory on the plate for the Confederation. He had planned a defensive battle that would follow the classic strategy of threatening the enemy in their own territory and then forcing them to attack. Lee had found the perfect defensive position near Cashtown, but he would never get there. The two armies had met and clashed 2 days ago near Gettysburg. Starting off as a skirmish between a few units, the battle had escalated until both armies ended up facing each other in full force, but the Union remained on the defensive. Under different circumstances, Robert E. Lee might have changed his position or retreated, but as I said, he needed a victory, a political one. And he was also a confident leader. In 3 years, the soldiers of the Army of Virginia had performed miracles, defeating larger armies one after another. He relied on the good morale of his men and the low morale of the Union troops. But times had changed, and the Army of the Potomac had matured. Veterans no longer had a tendency to flee when attacked, and the firepower of the artillery was much more lethal than it had been a year ago. Nevertheless, Lee felt that victory was possible. Jeb Stuart had returned with his cavalrymen, and the Union forces had been heavily bombarded. Lee's own losses were also significant, but the morale of those who remained and their confidence in him were high. So, this was the context in which Lee faced Gettysburg. As he rode along Seminary Ridge, Lee described his plan for that morning to his men. It would be a massive attack with all lines against what he believed was a weakened Union army that was barely holding on. This was a mistake. The first one. He had fought for too long on his own ground and forgot that soldiers fight better when they are defending their own homes. This had put him at an advantage in Virginia, but now it was the Unionists who were defending their home. They would no longer panic and break ranks at the sound of the rebel battle cry. General James Longstreet drew Lee's attention to the fact that 3 of his divisions had attacked the day before and had lost half of their effectives. They simply could not be effective in a similar attack. Lee agreed, but in spite of this warning, he ordered the 6 remaining divisions to prepare for a new attack. That was not a great call. It was the job of General Richard Ewell, whose troops repelled the 1st and 11th Union Corps on the first day, to lead his 3 divisions in an attack on the heavily fortified Union position on Culp's Hill, hours before the main attack. If he would have captured this hill, he might have repelled or broken the Union lines, but again, that didn't happen. The position was too strongly defended, and Ewell came away with a whole lot of casualties. Practically, his divisions were pounded and weren't able to mount another attack that day. In spite of this, the need for victory remained. In the past, Lee was successful at breaking through the center of the enemy's positions, and he was determined to do it again. Mind you, he had already lost 2/3 of his forces, and still he ordered Pickett to charge the enemy lines. In part, Lee was hoping that his artillery forces would make a difference. Ammunition for the cannons was limited, but everything they had left would be used to create a large barrage of fire that would terrorize the Union troops into defeat once Pickett commenced his attack. As you probably guessed, the plan didn't go so well. The Confederates were firing mainly with front-loading cannons towards the top of a hill, so it's safe to say that it wasn't easy to hit the Yankees behind their stone walls. The Confederate soldiers, however, did their job. They fired and fired. They endured the enemy's counter-bombardments until they ran out of ammo. Unfortunately though, for the Confederates at least, almost all of the shelling flew past the wall behind which the Yankees were waiting. Horses and ammo carts took some hits, but the soldiers not so much. But Robert E. Lee still had one more ace up his sleeve. General Jeb Stuart had recently returned to base, which is a story on its own and I talked about it in the previous episode. Anyway, Lee sent Stuart and his cavalry to flank the enemy and attack the same side Pickett was attacking, but from the rear. This move would destroy the Union line and, divided, they would retreat as they'd done so many times in the past. This was the move that should have brought Lee the victory he oh so desired, but this isn't what happened. While approaching, Stuart's column was attacked by a regiment of the Michigan Cavalry, led by the young but aggressive General George Armstrong Custer. They didn't actually have the numbers to defeat Pickett's men, who were 5 times as many, but they were able to delay them, which gave the Yankees enough time to send more cavalry. Thus, it soon became clear that Stuart was going nowhere. He had to retreat. So, there was no rear attack. The artillery ceased their fire and still, James Longstreet ordered the attack, albeit reluctantly. Over 10,000 men, basically the last intact divisions of Lee's armies, threw themselves into the battlefield. First, the artillery began bombarding the enemy's carefully formed lines. Then came the musket fire from the front and the flanks. The entire attack began before 4 o'clock in the afternoon and ended in less than an hour. Confederate soldiers were falling in waves, with only a few of them managing to reach the stone walls that sheltered the Union infantry. They were also quickly killed or taken prisoner. Very few of those attacking divisions stumbled back. Pickett lost half of his men and all 15 regiment commanders. 3/4 of those who attacked never returned back. As Pickett's soldiers retreated, Lee ordered the general to reassemble his division into battle formation, to which Pickett replied that he no longer had a division. In his desperate effort to win, Lee had exhausted his last reserve, fought in an unusual frontal offensive for his troops, and lost. There was nothing left to do but retreat. Lee's mistake cost the Confederacy its last chance at foreign intervention and independence. He was probably too confident that the soldiers who had brought him miraculous victories in the past would do the same again. Indisputably, Robert E. Lee's last and most dramatic mistake on the 3rd day of the Battle of Gettysburg was to order Pickett's charge. The final result demonstrated what Lee should have already known. He had no chance from the start. After his failure, the Army of Northern Virginia never again managed to take the offensive. Which, by the way, given the reason why they were fighting in the first place, is a good thing. I hope this video was interesting enough to have inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. You can leave your comments downstairs, and you can also check out my Patreon page if you want to support me. I do hope to see you next time. Bye.